Hello everyone! After being a full-time artist for a few years now and countless rearrangements of my studio, I finally have the perfect setup and I figured I'd share it with you today. So, come on in. Welcome to my studio, and though we've been here many times before, I haven't actually ever done a studio tour. But to be fair, it did take a lot of trial and error and moving stuff around until I really kind of felt like I got the right vibe. First and foremost, let's talk about ventilation so that I can turn mine off. One of the first and maybe the most important things to think about, especially if you're an oil painter, is ventilation. So I have a big door that I keep open basically all the time except for in the winter. I have an air purifier, which will turn off so that you don't have to listen to it. I also have a fan. I have the fan on, it rotates, it blows to the air purifier, and then it goes out the door. And that way, at the end of the day, you know, it runs all night so that every day I come in, it smells fresh, it feels good. I oftentimes keep it running while I'm working in here. So ventilation, first and foremost. But let's just kind of go around the room and I'll show you everything. We have my little stand that has my great-grandfather's book about him. So that's just a little piece that I like to keep in here with me, as well as my microphone for filming voiceovers. That's all down there. I try to make it look aesthetic. Up here, we have what looks like maybe a random table, but it does serve a few purposes. One is that I do put paintings there for photo shoots. It's set up aesthetically so that I can just do a bunch of detail and pretty shots of artwork when it's finished, and then it looks good for my website. I do have backdrops that I can put behind it, but for the most part, I think it ends up looking pretty good, but it is set up aesthetically for that. The other thing I use it for is for drying space. For my 9x12s, when I'm working through a lot in a week, I'll place them there and let them dry flat for a night before I hang them up. Paintings dry there. And then behind the door, I have all these little hooks. And then they can safely dry a bit longer hanging up, and then thereby have, you know, it stays a little bit dust free. So I like that. My chair, if I get really tired, but it also functions as kind of just an aesthetic corner that I can sit in front of my paintings and take some cool photos. Other new kid on the block that I just recently got is this tabouret, and I'm really excited about it. It's so perfect. We have this gorgeous thing, which took me a long time to justify buying just because, yeah, it's an investment. And I didn't want to buy it preemptively and not like it and not really know how or why to use it. But you can see I have my stool, my easel, and that is next to it. One thing to make note of is that both my easel and the tabouret are on wheels, so I can move it around. As daylight changes or as angles change and I don't want certain reflections, I can move everything around however I want, and I have tons of space in the center right here so that I can do that if I need. Other thing I think that's pretty important is a drafting table. You can see mine is pretty full. And though I don't use this drafting table all that often, it is a very important space for me to have just in case, because if I move my easel away, it gives me a really good place to sketch. I can write down ideas. I can store paintings that are, you know, drawn up, ready to go. You can see it also has a bunch of tools. It holds my iPad, any lenses, mic stuff. My headphones can charge right there. What I do have is underneath it, in the back below there, I have a long charging strip, so everything can charge. Most of the cords are out of the way, it's out of the shot, so you don't see cords everywhere, but I can just charge everything in that corner and keep it all kind of organized. I have my sketchbook open with all of my ideas and up and coming YouTube videos and courses and all of the things, all my ideas, all photos go here, blah, blah, blah. In this corner, we have my brushes, storage. This is kind of just my corner of everything because we have storage, brushes, plans, all the things. This brush case is Madeleine. Love it. I keep it stocked with all my favorite brushes that are kind of just like ready to grab and go. I have it organized personally where my main favorite ones appear to pick from, but then these are the ones that I use kind of daily and weekly, and just a good variety to pick from different things. And then of course, my whiteboard for ideas. And we have storage, more brushes that are mostly just backups and things that I don't really use that often. Books, of course. Art inspo from other artists that I love. You can see a lot of Jess Karp, and then Mary Jane Runk. I also have a little chart that just reminds me to vary my colors a little bit. And then we have this awesome little storage, which holds anything extra that I need. Sketchbooks, extra pads, extra drawing supplies. I really like having that just because I love being organized. You can tell it's pretty clean in here, but you know, everything's there. I also have this cabinet up here, which is more extra things. So I have all of my mediums, I have washing, cleaning stuff, towels, all of the oil painting, varnish, all of that is here. And then I have more of my acrylic stuff and just extra things here. So I have gold leaf, I have my fixatives and sprays and any spray varnishes. I have slow drying mediums for acrylic, gesso, any cups, all of that is just kind of extra things. So paints I store in two places. See it? I have acrylic down here. I have oil right there. And that extra storage of paint is under my drafting table. My paint that I use daily and want to pick from is in my new Tabouret by Madeleine. It's all stored there by color and by its complementary opposite. That's a little redundant because complementary is opposite, so they're organized by the complementary colors. Then I also have my drawing stuff. I have gloves if I need it, oil, that's my linseed. And then down here I have extra pads and palette paper, color wheels, my info, which can be found on my Patreon. I went through every common color and put the value that it is and whether it's warm or cool. And so I have that chart right here, and then I have extra supplies. Down at the bottom, I have all of my ready daily use stuff. So again, cleaning stuff, and then brush dip, my Gamsol, silicoil, then I have a bunch of books. And way in the back, which I don't think you can see, I have some Andrew Tischler DVDs because why not? The other not so glamorous thing that we should probably talk about is disposal. So I have, sorry, it's very full right now. I'm about to take it out, but I don't really ever film that corner because when I do, I go very dark. I'm always backlit, but this is where I keep my extra filming light. That's my tripod. And then where I was going with that is that I have my fireproof trash can, which if you're working with linseed oil, to me, is really important to have because they can spontaneously combust. I don't want that. I recommend getting a fireproof waste bin so that if anything does happen, it at least buys you time. Let's go through the closet a little bit. So behind me, I have it set up where I have a pin right there and I hang, you probably are aware of this piece of paper, but that is part of the self-taught artist curriculum. And that hangs there so that it's one, out of the way, and two, it's not basically in the direction that I film more often. Because my light is coming from this direction, I almost always have my camera this way so that you can see. But in my closet, got a few things. So I've got a bunch of extra canvas and finished canvas. Over here is my storage. So for all things shipping, I have envelopes, certificates of authenticity, packaging, camera supplies. I have boxes to ship. That is also a fireproof portfolio bag that I just hang in the back. Again, just all kind of my extra. And if we switch sides, I have more storage. So again, that's a backdrop for photography. I have some finished extra artwork. I have my heater for the winter. And then just a whole bunch of extra art supplies. I have extra frames right there, extra canvas, my pochade box and drawing box. And then this is where I keep all my finished sketchbooks and extra hard drives. It's kind of just an extra storage thing. All the ugly things that you don't really need to see or want to see daily. But overall, that's kind of it, you know? Ventilation, a cute little area for taking photos and letting things dry. I have a bunch of hooks on the wall so that artwork can hang everywhere. I have my mobile tabouret or art cart and easel. I have a stool, drafting table, a place for my brushes, storage for my brushes, storage for things, readily available things that I use. That kind of is it. And I have it all centered around the direction that the light comes in through my window. Over the years, I've kind of gone through a few different styles and moving things around and tried to find what worked, what didn't, how I used things the best, how to film the best. And this to me is just the best setup that I've come up with. It's aesthetic. Again, I have the pop of green and the sculpture behind me and some artwork so that when I do film, there's distance between me and the background. It's a pretty background, it's clean. Everything here looks clean and aesthetic. Everything that is behind you does not have to be clean and aesthetic. And yeah, it's done intentionally and through quite a bit of trial and error. But I am really happy with how everything is set up right now, and it's just a cozy little studio that I can show up and be ready to work in every day. So I'm gonna sit down for this one. I did get a special request to talk about studio lighting, which is a great question because it is potentially a little bit tricky. And I think that there's a few ways that you can approach it, both budget friendly and very expensively. But let's talk about kind of ground up some decisions you can make to help you out and make it a little bit cheaper, and we'll get to more expensive. So one of the things to think about, I've talked about this in another video, but I do think the color of your walls is very important, especially if you're using natural light, and especially if you get a lot of light that comes into your studio. The reason for this is because light reflects and bounces all around. So if you say you pick a color that is all very cool and your eyes just are bombarded by these cool tones, you will almost subconsciously counteract that by then painting warm, and vice versa. If you have a very warm toned wall, you're going to compensate by painting cooler. So how do we go about this? Well, one of the things that I do is I actually have two different colored walls. I have one that's cool and one that is warm, maybe a little bit more neutral. Either way, they kind of balance each other out so that I have both in this room. Even though the color of your walls could be considered so minute, it is still a minute change, whether in the positive or the negative. So I do have a warm wall and a cool wall so that I have both, and both are kind of bouncing around and create a more balanced space in here. As I said before, I work solely on natural light. If that's what you want to do as well, there are some tips and tricks that you've probably heard before. One is that if you're in the northern hemisphere, you want a north-facing art studio so that essentially direct light never comes in, but you get consistent light all day long. It is not directly coming in and like changing shadows as the day goes by. You're just getting almost diffused light that's coming in. So, and then if you're in the southern hemisphere, you want a south-facing studio. I myself am actually in a south-facing art studio. And to be completely honest, though I do run into moments of when I need to photograph, you know, there's certain times of the day that I can't photograph because there's so much glare, or I just have to move things around so that I can do that. Same thing with painting, kind of as the day goes by, different seasons, I do kind of have to just slightly move my easel around a little bit to reduce glare. But other than that, I don't really notice that much of a difference, and I would much rather paint with natural light. I feel better doing that. I love having the window open, all of those things. So the next step up is depending on which direction your studio is, and say you don't want to work off of natural light. Okay, we close all the blinds. The other thing that I have heard, actually, this is from Andrew Tischler, is that he talks about painting in an almost black studio. So painting his walls very dark, if not black, and that deadens the light. So there is no bounced light essentially going around. And when it does, I don't know, it basically just eats up light. You can have the utmost control of the light going around in your studio. With that, you're going to need studio lights. I have heard that some of the most efficient ways to do this is to get a runner of lights kind of above you and have them facing different directions, or a big kind of photography light that has a light box on it so it's diffused. And usually people keep them between 5,000 to 5,500 Kelvin. And that's the temperature that they're at, and it mimics natural light the most. The other thing I've heard people do is that with those runner lights facing different directions, they'll alternate one cool, one warm. And again, just like we've been talking about up until this point, it just counteracts itself and just kind of balances out, and it gives you a little bit of both. So to me, those are kind of the two ways. One uses natural light, and you're kind of a little bit at the whims of Mother Nature. I do that. I don't honestly feel like I run into that many problems with it. The other thing is having ultimate control over your lighting, having a black room, curtains, and then studio lighting. Both are fine. There's plenty of people that do both, are very successful with both. I have the setup that works for me and that makes me feel the happiest. So my best advice for that is create a studio that feels the best for you. You want it to be a space that you show up and enjoy being there. If that means cutting out distractions and having a dark room, great, work with that. If you're like me and you compulsively need to be able to look outside and get sunlight and see your horses playing in the field, whatever it is, I love being connected with outside, and I need my windows open. Then you do the best you can and you make decisions to help you with that. So hopefully that clarifies studio lighting. I could probably do an entire in-depth video on that alone, but hopefully just this kind of covered the basis of that. As far as my studio goes, I can't believe this is the first time that I'm sharing it with you really, but I'm not surprised at the same time just because it did take so long to acquire everything that I wanted and set up everything that I wanted. So if you look at my studio and you think you have to have all of these things, or you wish you had all of these things, trust me, it has taken me 2 or 3 years to slowly acquire everything and then just build up a space that feels right. You can be a great artist without any of these things, but down the line, it is really nice to just have a space that is yours and enjoy showing up to. And with your own studio, don't be afraid to rearrange things many times. I mean, I used to do it probably like 4 or 5 times a year. I would rearrange it entirely. I learned something new from each setup until I finally kind of just have the one that I really like. With that, I really hope you enjoyed this studio tour. Thank you for spending the day with me. If you're interested in any more of my content, there is going to be another video popping up right here somewhere. I hope to see you there and you can spend more time with me. As always, thank you so much for joining, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.